Hey, third graders. So today we're going to talk about making sure to write about your reading so you can keep track and kind of organize all the things that are going on, and then make it able for you to then talk about it later with a book club or your teacher. So what we're going to do is take a look at a few different ideas, and then you can think about what helps you the most, and I can share what I think helps me the most. So we talked about writing like our list of characters, right? That's one piece. But then the other thing that we want to keep track of in mysteries is who the suspects are and those clues. So making a suspect list of who you think it might be and then some of the clues. So you can either write it kind of like I did, or some people might like to make a list of clues and then you could keep track like of page numbers on the clues that you find. Another way you might do this is going chapter by chapter. So you could make a timeline, sort of like this, where you say, okay, here's what happened in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, or you could make it even more like of a list, like chapter 1, here's what happened, chapter 2, here's what happened. It's really up to you. I kind of like doing a couple different things, right? Having our character list and the suspect list. The clues are really important though, and thinking about motives, which in our story so far, we don't really have any motives. We have some suspects and some possible clues, but we aren't sure which ones are important. It's kind of something you have to keep track of all the clues and then try to slowly piece things together to see how to solve this mystery. So for right now, like this last chapter, we know Maureen drove Wallace Wallace to the hotel and he got there. And then we met the hotel manager. So Mr. Linkletter, he was the last to see Wallace Wallace, right? He said he checked in to the hotel and he said Wallace Wallace checked into room 303 at 8:05, right? That was one clue. And then he said that they noticed somebody, because they looked at the hotel register, somebody checked into room 302 right next to it at 8:15, but that signature was smudged. Wallace Wallace's was legible and it matched the letter that Dink got. But they're wondering, who is this mystery person that checked into the room right next to his right after he checked in? And from there, Wallace Wallace did not show up at the Book Nook. So now we have to read chapter 6 to see what is going on next. So Dink stared at Mr. Linkletter. No answer. Oh yeah, I forgot. Mr. Linkletter called Wallace Wallace's room because he said he was still up there, but then no one answered the phone. So Dink, he stares at Mr. Linkletter. No answer. Are you sure? Mr. Linkletter nodded. He looked puzzled. Perhaps he's resting and doesn't want to be disturbed. Can we go up and see? Ruth Rose smiled sweetly at Mr. Linkletter. Then we'd know for sure. Mr. Linkletter shook his head. We cannot disturb our guests, young miss. We have rules at the Shangri-La. Now, good day and thank you. Ruth Rose opened her mouth. But Good day, Mr. Linkletter said firmly again. Dink and the others walked toward the door. Something smells fishy, muttered Dink. Yeah, Josh said. And I think it's that Linkletter guy. See how he tried to hide the register? Then he turned his back. Maybe he didn't even call room 303. Maybe he was warning his partners in crime. What are you suggesting, Josh? Mavis asked. Maybe Mr. Linkletter is the kidnapper, Josh said. He was the last one to see Wallace Wallace. A man wearing a red cap tapped Dink on the shoulder. Excuse me, but I overheard you talking to my boss, Mr. Linkletter. Maybe I can help you find Wallace Wallace. My kids love his books. Great, Dink said. Can you get us into his room? The man shook his head. No, but I know the maid who cleaned the third-floor rooms this morning. Maybe she noticed something. With his back to Mr. Linkletter, the man scribbled a few words on a pad and handed the page to Dink. Good luck, the man whispered and hurried away. What'd he write? Josh asked. Outside, Dink said. They all shoved through the revolving door in front of the hotel. Dink looked at the piece of paper. The maid's name is Olivia Nugent. She lives at the Acorn Apartments, number 4. Livy Nugent? I know her, Ruth Rose said. She used to be my babysitter. Acorn is right around the corner on Oak Street, Dink said. Let's go. Soon all 4 were standing in front of Livy Nugent's door. She answered it with the baby in her arms. Another little kid held onto her leg and stared at Dink and the others. He had peanut butter all over his face and in his hair. Why? The boy's mother said, I'm not buying any cookies, and I already get the Green Lawn Gazette. She was wearing a man's blue shirt and jeans. Her brown hair stuck out from under a Yankees baseball cap. Livy, it's me, Ruth Rose said. Olivia stared at Ruth Rose, then broke into a grin. Ruth Rose, you're so big. What are you up to these days? A man at the hotel gave us your name. What man? He was sort of old, wearing a red cap, Dink said. Livy chuckled. Freddie old? He's only 30, so why did he send you to see me? He told us you cleaned the rooms on the 3rd floor this morning, Dink said. Did you clean room 303? Livy Nugent shifted the baby to her other arm. Randy, please stop pulling on Mommy's leg. Why don't you go finish your lunch? Randy ran back into the apartment. No, Livy told Dink. Nobody slept in that room. The bed was still made this morning. The towels were still clean and dry. I remember because there were 2 rooms in a row that I didn't have to clean. 303 and 302. 303 and 302. I had room 302 had a do not disturb sign hanging on the doorknob. So I came home early, paid off the babysitter, and made our lunches. But Mr. Linkletter told us Wallace Wallace checked into room 303 last night, Ruth Rose said. Not the Wallace Wallace, the mystery writer. My kid sister devours his books. Dink nodded. He was supposed to sign books at the Book Nook this morning, but he never showed up. We even saw his signature on the hotel register, Ruth Rose said. Well, Wallace Wallace might have signed in, but he never slept in that room. Livy grinned. Unless he's a ghost. I wonder if Mr. Linkletter could have made a mistake about the room number, Mavis suggested quietly. I'm just going to show you a picture because then you can see there is Livy and her kiddos and the kids talking to her. Livy smiled at Mavis. You must not be from around here. Mr. Linkletter never makes mistakes. So Wallace Wallace signed in, but he didn't sleep in his room, said Dink. That means someone must have kidnapped him before he went to bed, Josh said. Livy's eyes bugged. Kidnapped? Geez, Mr. Linkletter will have a fit. She imitated his voice. We have rules about kidnappings at the Shangri-La. Everyone except Dink laughed. All he could think about was Wallace Wallace, his favorite author, kidnapped. So suddenly a crash came from inside the apartment. Oops, gotta run, Livy said. Randy's playing bulldozer with his baby sister stroller again. I hope you find Wallace Wallace. My kid sister will die if he doesn't write another book. They walked slowly back to Main Street. Dink felt as though his brain was spinning around inside his head. A lot of stuff just happened. Now he felt certain that Wallace Wallace had been kidnapped. But who did it and when? And where was Wallace Wallace being kept? Guys, I'm feeling confused, he said. Can we just sit somewhere and go over the facts again? Good idea, Josh said. I always think better when I'm eating. I'm feeling a bit peckish too, Mavis said. I need a quiet cup of tea and a sandwich. Should we meet again after lunch? Ruth Rose looked at her watch. Let's meet at 2 o'clock. Where? Josh asked. Back at the hotel. Dink peered through the glass door at Mr. Linkletter. Unless Maureen Higgins and Mr. Linkletter are both lying, he said, Wallace Wallace walked into the Shangri-La last night and never came out. And that's the end of chapter 6. So let's take a little think. Some of the weird things that just happened are Livy that we just met, who cleans the hotel rooms. She said that room 302 had a do not disturb. And then room 303, where Wallace Wallace was supposed to be, the bed was never slept in. So I'm going to keep track of a couple more of those things, and we'll have to keep thinking, because now Livy is another person that saw him, or Livy was another person that knows who he is, but never, she says that no one was slept in that bed. So this is the tricky part, is we have all these characters and we have some clues and I'm trying to think of the word, when they have potential, right? They had the possibility that they could have committed it, but we don't have any motives. Just a bunch of people who have said they've seen him, and we have to decide whether we can trust them or not. Tricky business, right? So Miss We're gonna have Miss Kelly's gonna do the next chapter in our next lesson. So your job, keep working on keeping track of these clues, right? Make sure you keep track of all these new people that you're meeting, the characters, and then considering whether they're suspects and what some of those clues might be. And you decide how you want to keep track of it, but you have to make sure that you do, otherwise you might miss an important part. So I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. I will hope to see you soon. I hope you're all doing well.